I'm building a new desk setup for my M1 MacBook Air, and the cornerstone of any good desk setup is a fantastic mechanical keyboard. So today, we're going to take all of these parts and make the absolute best mechanical keyboard for my M1 MacBook Air. First up, let's lay out all of the parts and pieces for this keyboard build. For the keyboard itself, we're using the Keychron K2, which technically means we could stop the video right here. This is a fully assembled keyboard that will work straight out of the box. But that's boring, and I haven't even gotten to spray paint anything yet. So we're gonna put some elbow grease into this and give it a makeover. This is a dual purpose keyboard, and today we have the Mac variant, and it's considered a 75% keyboard with 84 keys. I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle on nomenclature here. Basically, there are a ton of keyboard variants out there, but that's not the point of today's video. In the box, you get some random keycaps, a keycap puller, a normal USB-C to USB-A cable, and the keyboard itself. Pretty standard stuff. We'll also be adding a sleek coiled cable from CableMod, and we'll be swapping these boring gray keycaps out for a set of very nice clone botanicals. I know this is a cardinal sin and faux pas, but they were actually in stock and didn't cost more than the keyboard itself. Hate me if you must. The first step of any keyboard build or customization is to disassemble everything and allow for customization of each individual part. And this is a good time to mention that what drew me to this in the first place is it has that dual use modes between Windows and Mac keyboard layouts. Personally, day to day, I use a mechanical Windows keyboard with my MacBook desk setup, and I basically just treat the Windows key as I would treat the Mac command key, and it works out all right, but it would be nice to have real Mac function keys going forward. Quick note, there is a version 2 of this keyboard that comes with hot swappable switches. That means you can more easily remove them. However, this particular board does not, which means old Mr. Desolderer is gonna have some fun today. Ask me if I knew there were 2 versions of this board before I bought this specific variant. Removing all the keycaps and taking this board apart is always one of my favorite things, and thankfully it's pretty easy to hear. The included keycap puller is actually not terrible. The one that I bought came with MX Brown switches, but you can pick a few different switch options out there. Those are soldered down to the PCB, and I think MX Browns are fine, and personally I think they receive way too much hate online, but they're also not my favorite. We'll be switching them out for some MX Red linear switches after we take care of all the disassembly. Now that we've got everything taken apart, it's time to get to some of that good old customization. Today we're gonna go with a white glossy finish with this shell. Heading out to the super duper spray paint area, which has been moved inside after some nightmare wind ruined part of the last keyboard I built. We're gonna give this shell 3 coats of matte white spray paint. I have to say moving this inside was totally the right answer. If I'm gonna do this very often, I probably need to set up an actual professional station for this and not just some cardboard box in my garage. While these dry, let's start prepping the switches. Lubing switches is generally one of those practices that folks complain about most often when it comes to mechanical keyboards, but I don't personally hate it. It's kind of therapeutic to have a nice 2-hour video essay going about a game that I'm never gonna play while I crank these things out. My personal philosophy is that you only really need to put a coat of lube on the mechanical parts. Those mechanical parts that will rub up against each other specifically. I mean, this is a mechanical system after all, mechanical keyboard. So I put a decent layer on the stem and the spring, and that's pretty much it. Something new I've started doing recently is using switch film, and this is just a piece of plastic that goes between the upper and lower housing for the switch and should take out some of the rattle and wobble when typing. While we've got the lubing tools out, let's also handle the stabilizers. These parts are for the bigger keys such as the spacebar, the enter key, etc. And of all the things that make a mechanical keyboard, this is the one thing that you do that you really have to get right. These come pre-lubed from the factory, but factory lubes are terrible and very often inconsistent. And well, they're not inconsistent on this one. This is the single most over-lubed set of stabilizers that I've ever seen in my life. I spent more time trying to get lube out of these than I did actually getting them where I wanted. I'm legit flabbergasted why they put so much in here. It took forever just to get these to stop being a mess. Much like the switches, I'm only gonna lube the parts that cause friction, so we'll just use a little bit more G-lube here. On the part of the stem that enters the stabilizer housing, we'll also put on a healthy dose of dielectric grease to give it nice smooth operation and stop that awful bad stabilizer sound. The parts were actually pretty good, and we don't need to balance or mess with the bars themselves at all. Now that we've got the pieces ready, let's move on to desoldering the PCB. Normally, this would be a headache-inducing, super long process, but as my grandpa always said, bring the proper tools for the job, Gary, and this Hako desolderer makes shockingly quick work of this. I'm not saying go buy a super expensive niche tool that you don't need, but if you are going to be desoldering electric components often, this makes life so much easier. Seriously, this took like 5 minutes even while trying to record different angles of it at the same time. Now that we've got the switches out, we can put these brown switches where they belong and seat our lubed and filmed reds into place. I spent all of my money on the desolderer, and I don't have a decent soldering iron, so we'll have to make this pull double duty today. Soldering is so much faster, and it's really actually kind of fun to do, which makes me feel like I probably screwed something up along the way, but I guess we'll find that out later. Once complete with the electrical bits, let's head back over to the case and add the last couple of coats of glossy finish. And I think this is really going to make the Apple aesthetic really come together, and it should look fantastic once it's all back together and complete. Whew, and here we are. We've got all of the pieces ready to go, so let's assemble them and see how they all look once put all back together. I think this case turned out really nice, and here's something that we can do. The crowning achievement of this customization is we finally have a use for our Apple stickers. We normally get these and don't do anything with them, but how are you going to make a MacBook keyboard without putting the Mac Apple right on there? There we go. It is an Apple keyboard, and we know that because we put an Apple sticker on there. I think that's a lot of fun. That's the sticker that came with the Mac Studio, by the way. Okay, so let's just pop this all back together and see if it actually works, because I'm not sure. After we resoldered all of this stuff, it looks good. But, you know, generally when something goes a lot easier than I think it's going to go, that means I screwed something up. So let's plug this back in so we can have Wi-Fi and battery access. Okay, put that back in there. Whew, these switches already, we haven't even put the keycaps on yet. I think this sounds good, and I think this looks really good. I like a two-tone keyboard. That's why we did not also paint the plate white. I like the contrasting look, and I think it's going to look really good once we get the keycaps on. Boom, there we go. We now have the plate, the switches, everything is back to being installed. This has a lot of heft to it. There are a few other mods we could have done to this keyboard. We could have put a lot more stuff in the plate itself, but I really think this is going to turn out pretty well without overdoing it. I think one of the things that you can do with mechanical keyboards, it really easily is overdo it. So I think this is going to be a nice, simple, clean layout. Boom, okay, there is the layout of the keyboard. Now, because my Botanical Clone keycap set did not one-for-one match a Mac computer, I did have to snag some of the original keycaps off of here to fill in for this. But you know, they don't clash as much as I thought they would. It actually looks pretty nice compared to the rest of the board. I think this turned out fantastic. I think it looks straight up incredible. But, you know, we have to see how it sounds. I mean, mechanical keyboards are all about the sound, right? Wow, I think that sounds incredible. I'm really, really impressed with how this sounds and how it looks. But it actually needs to work, right? So let's see if it actually works. Okay, we got my MacBook Pro 16. If this actually works. Okay, when we turn on the power, hey, the light comes on. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but the light turns on, so that means at least there's power going to the keyboard, and we didn't totally brick it. But this is the perfect opportunity to add the last little flourish to this build, which is this sweet coiled cable. Because it's not a full mechanical keyboard without a coiled cable. I mean, I've seen enough of the internet to know that. Listen, everybody cross your fingers and hope that it actually works, because my soldering is not yet like a full-time thing that I'm really good at. So here we go. Hey, and it's working! Holy crap! Oh my goodness, I love... you don't understand, like, when I solder these things, I just assume, I'm like, wow, this is going really easy. I assume that means because it's broken, but let's see. Oh, I think all the keys are going to work. Oh, that's so incredible. Okay, testing. 1, 2, wow, I can't type. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dogs. Exclamation points all around. That is so good. The function keys all work. Oh, that's so awesome. Oh, I love it. So yes, this is now going to be my full-time keyboard that I'm going to use with my M1 MacBook Air desk setup. And if you like this video, I bet you'd like to find the MacBook Air for the absolute cheapest price. And you can find a video showing you how to do that by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.